Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Hey, what's up, and welcome to Q&A, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. First question comes from Dog Pound 12. Q, I know this isn't about the video, but what do you think about Ford taking a pay cut? Took a massive pay cut today. Mary Kay is reporting it's all but guaranteed to be the end of the Chubb era. Not likely that they keep 4 running backs, right? I would say this. There are a lot of people assuming that the Browns are going to have these concrete rules in how they structure the roster this year. I think this is a year where you can throw some of that out the window because the Browns aren't in a championship competition window right now. When you're in more of a championship competition window, you're going to be more strict about what positions you keep. You're going to bring your roster down to a science because you're trying to get all the juice you can out of that roster. This is a different case where the Browns are trying to squeeze all the juice they can out of the young players on the roster. So that might change how they prioritize keeping players. So one, I would recommend not thinking too strictly about, what the Browns kept in the past, how many guys have they kept in the past, and thinking the Browns are going to be super strict to that. They could keep 4 quarterbacks. They could keep 4 running backs. They could keep 4 quarterbacks and 4 running backs and figure out who else needs to make the team wherever else they are. I don't think they're beholden to a specific template of the roster. So if they think that the pay cut made it so they could roster Jerome Ford and then they get a deal for Nick Chubb that they feel like makes sense, I don't think that's crazy to think that they could keep them both. It could also be the case that this is the end for Jerome Ford. Not Jerome Ford, but for Nick Chubb. I tend to lean towards this tells me that things are going better for Nick Chubb in Chicago than I think the Browns might have hoped. And maybe they're not confident that Nick Chubb will come back here. I don't know if that means that the Browns have closed the door on the Nick Chubb thing. I think we just kind of have to wait and see until we hear something official on it. But it doesn't look good if you're somebody who, like me, who wants to bring in Nick Chubb. So that's kind of where we are. The Spartan says, do you worry about the possibility of Sanders showing just enough for the Browns to want him to be a long-term starting option, but not enough for us to feel good about him competing with guys like Burrow or Lamar? I'd rather keep taking shots looking for a Hall of Famer than settle on one guy who is good but not elite. Well, that's how you end up, right? So like if that's your philosophy, I don't blame you for that philosophy. A lot of NFL media has trained you to think that if you don't have a Hall of Fame quarterback, you don't matter, even though the team that just won the Super Bowl does not have a Hall of Fame quarterback, and they still were able to win the Super Bowl with Jalen Hurts. But nonetheless, if that's how you go about it, then you can't be one of the people who are upset about the Baker Mayfield thing, because that was the ideology that fueled that. Baker's good. Baker's not great. Baker's not the kind of quarterback you want to pay. But you want to pay somebody who has more all-pro potential. That at the time was Deshaun Watson. Now, to get to the point that you made, right? The possibility of Sanders showing just enough for the Browns to want him long-term as a starting option, but not good enough to feel about competing with Burrow and Lamar. I think since Sanders is a 5th-round pick, that question is irrelevant now. When we were talking about Sanders being a 1st-round pick or even a 2nd-round pick, that question mattered, right? If you felt like Sanders can be on par with Lamar and Burrow. But for the duration of Sanders' rookie deal, that question is irrelevant, because you're not going to pay him like Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson. You're going to be paying him below league minimum money for the duration of his rookie deal. So if you feel like you can get starting quarterback play out of Shedeur Sanders on a rookie deal, then you take that, especially if it's anything above average quarterback play from Shedeur Sanders. It's not the worst situation in the world. The question you have to ask with guys like that is, how much do you pay them when it comes time to pay them? And is it worth paying those guys when it's time to pay him? That's the big question. So I don't worry about that as much because I think those questions answer themselves because Sanders is a 5th round pick, and you're not committed to putting too much of the cap towards him. And again, the reason I think it's important to think of if this guy can hit that Burrow bar, if you're taking him number 2 overall, is because you're passing on elite talent to take that quarterback. And if that quarterback is not an elite talent, then you're passing on things that you're going to need to help that quarterback be successful at a high level in order to take the quarterback. It just doesn't make sense. But if you take the quarterback in the 5th round, you're able to draft everybody else that you wanted to draft, then all of a sudden that question doesn't matter as much. So you see the difference there? A lot of it matters that Sanders went in the 5th round. And I'm going to be honest, I think it's dangerous to look at good starting quarterbacks and say, well, they're not Hall of Famers, so throw them out, right? Eventually, you have to pick a guy who can hold the position down for you long term and just commit to making it work with that guy, right? You can't keep throwing starters out because they're not Joe Burrow, they're not Lamar Jackson, because there's only like 3 of those guys in the league or 5 of those guys in the league, and the odds of you getting them aren't high. So you got to figure out how to make it work with something else. Again, the Eagles made it work without one of those guys. A lot of teams can make it work without one of those guys, even in the era where there are as many dominant quarterbacks as there are right now. Josh Copeland says, I get the insurance policy of drafting 2 QBs, but I'd feel better if the organization felt strongly about one or the other picks. Area of needs at the QB position. Just so important you keep picking as many as you can to hit. Again, I'm not really a big fan of that philosophy, but I get it. I just think it's difficult to figure out if we have our guy before next year's draft. Obviously, best case we do, and we have 2 first-round picks to bolster roster. Yeah. I think it's worthwhile to take a swing at late-round quarterback prospects when you don't have anybody that you really even feel good about finishing the year with. Because let's face it, when Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett are battling out to start, that sounds like a team that's going to start more than 1 quarterback, probably more than 2 quarterbacks, probably somewhere within the range of 3 and 4 quarterbacks. So, last year the Browns played 4 quarterbacks. The year before they played 5. I don't think this year is going to be any differently. I think the Browns are going to start 4 different quarterbacks over the course of this year, maybe even 5. Barring like there might be like some kind of emergency or something like that, or somebody might get injured down the line. So yeah, it's going to be difficult to figure out what you have, but you don't just have to figure it out in this year's draft, right? Let's say you don't really know what Shedeur Sanders is in 2025, and then you draft somebody in 2026. Well, you're not going to want that guy to start in 2026. So you're still going to need Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders to play games in 2026. So you're not just giving them 1 year, you're giving them possibly 2, maybe even 3 years, however long you feel it necessary to keep the guy that you draft early on the bench. So there's still some purpose there, right? It's not like they're just going to be here 1 year, and that's all they're guaranteed to do. There's still different ways you can use them. And like, hey, if you get a really solid backup for cheap money in the situation you're in at quarterback, then, that's also a good thing too. Browns AP says, hey, Q, if we hit on either a rookie quarterback, how much do you think that affects the draft next year? Which position do we prioritize? And do you think we use both first-round picks or trade one? What do you think it could be like? Love the vids. Amazing work. It depends on what level of hit we're talking about with the quarterback, right? Do we have somebody we think can start? Do we have somebody we think can be a franchise quarterback? What level of hit did we get with quarterback? Like, how much potential do we think is there at the quarterback position? Because there's a world where, one of these rookies, they play well, maybe even well enough for you to go 500, but somebody so undeniable during the college football season that you can't pass up the idea of drafting them, right? It could be a Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers situation, where it's like, hey, we like what you did here, but we're not going to pass up on that. That dude, once in a generation, MVP level ceiling on that guy. So, it depends on how all of this plays out, right? what this room could look like and what can happen going forward. Next one comes from Luke, who says, so Q, do you think the Browns will start the season with Flacco? If he can get through a whole season, who will they bring in after him? I think it's going to be between Flacco or Pickett. And then I think Dylan Gabriel probably comes in after. And then after Dylan Gabriel, we're probably talking about Shedeur Sanders. I think Shedeur is probably going to be the last quarterback to play, because that's the guy you want to give the longest run to instead of somebody that you might pull to see somebody else. BG the one says, appreciate your work, man. Would you take Baker Mayfield back if he decides not to opt in with the Bucs next offseason, or just see what's there in the draft with 2 first-round picks? This is if none of the core QBs currently on the roster are options. Hey, look, I want to bring this to people's attention because I think you bring up a good point. Now, I don't think it's going to be Baker Mayfield, right? I think that's probably not going to happen. But the idea that the Browns are only going to use that extra first-round pick to take a player or to trade up to take a player is not as unanimous as I think people assume it might be. The Browns could use that first-round pick to include themselves in a trade for an established quarterback, like a Baker Mayfield that might be available, like a Brock Purdy or, Dak Prescott or somebody like that, right? They might decide to go down that line, and that's a resource that can help them do it. There's a lot of different ways that this could go down, but expect the Browns to be very creative and very aggressive about the quarterback position over the next couple of years. Next question comes from Dogwatch. Do you like any of the UDFAs that Cleveland picked up this year? They didn't pick up any UDFAs that I was too familiar with, so I can't say that I'm like, oh man, I'm super thrilled that they got this guy. That being the case, I'll wait till camp to really have a thought on any of those guys, but UDFAs are like bonus money to me. Anything you get out them is extra. Derek Brown says, yo, Q, wants your opinion on the narrative that Jimmy forced the Sanders pick, with them coupling the last few picks to move up and get him, leads me to believe more so that it was more of a collective decision, getting on the phone to find a trade partner because the owner says, sounds like dictatorship. Barry and Stefanski don't give me the vibes of yes, man. What's your take? Yeah, I agree with you on that. I don't think that Jimmy forced the Sanders pick. I think that's a convenient narrative. But think about what that assumption is, that Jimmy forced the Sanders pick. Is that Jimmy Haslam is like the driving force behind getting Shedeur Sanders here. I'm going to be honest with y'all. One, Jimmy has been in no mood to be forcing these kind of options after the Watson trade, right? He meddled in the Watson trade. He admitted that's a failure, and everything he's done since then has been a reaction against that. Basically, he's been not meddling this whole time, right? He didn't meddle with the Miles situation. I don't see why he would meddle in day 3 of the draft. And that's another part of it. If Jimmy Haslam were going to meddle, I doubt he waits till the last pick of the draft to meddle. That makes no sense, too. I think what happened there was, hey, Kevin felt like for the pick you would be giving up for what's left on our board, it's a no-brainer to take this guy. And I think Andrew felt like the same way. Maybe you got some reservations here or there, but they felt like he was a better bet than everybody else on that board, and he plays the quarterback position. I think that's truly what happened. They maybe didn't go into the process in love with Shedeur Sanders. Maybe they were concerned about some of the things that they've heard about Shedeur as much as anybody else, but the value proposition there was just high enough to where they couldn't say no to it. And once they got the opportunity to move up, when somebody said yes, they did, and they took them. I think it's that simple. Occam's razor, right? The most simple solution is usually the case. That feels like it's the case. Logan says, do you think Shedeur Sanders is a smart QB? His failure with the Giants suggests he lacks the ability to learn schemes at even a college level? Okay. Whoa. What the fuck are we talking about? Shedeur Sanders played in a pro-style offense. He had a pro-offensive coordinator in Pat Shurmur, and he runs concepts that you see ran on Sundays. And I'm going to just be real about the New York Giants, man. They took Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart's tape does not scream guy who runs NFL concepts. There's not an NFL concept in Lane Kiffin's offense. That's just the truth of it, right? It's a lot of RPOs. It's a lot of gimmicky bullshit in that offense. So if the Giants don't think he can learn schemes at an NFL or college level, they have demonstrated they don't know what the fuck they talking about. Like, I'm honestly, like, if that's their takeaway, I'm fine betting against them. Shedeur, like, the one thing he's proven in college, amongst others, is he can handle an NFL offense. He was in a Pat Shurmur offense. That is a NFL offense. Ironically enough, the Giants used to have Pat Shurmur up there as the head coach. So, nah, I don't think that's a problem. You don't run Pat Shurmur's offense if you don't study the playbook, right? Like, I think that's going a bit far. Maybe he didn't prepare for the pre-draft stuff, but he was clearly a prepared quarterback during the college football season. Now, how good you think his tape was, how high of a grade you would have given him in the draft, all that shit's debatable, but let's not act like he was in some kind of Mickey Mouse RPO offense like Ole Miss's. He was in a real NFL offense that runs consistent NFL concepts on a regular basis that asks the quarterback to do NFL things in college. So, nah, I think you're going a bit far there. Shedeur, like, I don't know if he's the fastest processor in the world, but he was asked to do things that are far more difficult than a lot more quarterbacks were asked to in this draft class if you're looking at processing and seeing what you're seeing during the play at an NFL level. But that's my answer to that. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.